The protagonist, Richard Thornton, is an antiquarian with a passion for rare and ancient books. He works in a small antique shop in a quiet town. One seemingly ordinary day, Richard receives a mysterious box sent by an anonymous collector. Inside, he finds an old book, worn and without a title on its cover, with no information about its origin. The cover is made of an unknown material, with a texture that seems to change as he touches it, almost as if the book itself is alive. At first, Richard assumes the book is just an old relic, possibly a collector's item from an occultist or mystic. But as he opens the first few pages, he notices something strange. The writing inside makes no sense at all. The words are made up of intricate symbols, unlike any language he has ever encountered. There is something almost hypnotic about the way the symbols glow faintly, as if they are shifting ever so slightly, rearranging themselves in a way Richard cannot comprehend. Intrigued, Richard starts investigating the book. He attempts to translate the symbols and even consults some linguist friends, but no one can identify the language. It's as if the book comes from a time and place that no longer exists, something never recorded in human knowledge. Still, Richard cannot stop looking at the book, feeling as though something is calling him. A sense of unease begins to grow in his stomach, but he can't resist the pull of curiosity. As the days go by, Richard becomes obsessed with the mysterious book. He spends his nights attempting to understand its contents, using a magnifying glass and soft lighting, as if it's the only way to unlock a secret hidden within the pages. As he digs deeper into the text, something strange starts happening. The words and symbols begin to glow more intensely when he touches them. The strokes on the pages no longer stay fixed, they subtly shift, making the text seem to change constantly. As he tries to decode the text, Richard begins to feel an increasing sense of discomfort. He starts to see visions. First, they are just flashes of strange lights and shadows he cannot identify. But soon these visions become more distinct, massive, formless beings floating in an endless void. In one of these visions, the being approaches Richard, and although its form cannot be understood, he feels as though it is calling to him. The being seems to convey a sense of urgency, as if it is waiting for something that Richard has yet to grasp. When he wakes up, Richard feels that the world around him is just a little more distant, a little more unreal. He finds it difficult to distinguish between what is dream and what is reality. Objects in his home start to appear distorted, with colors changing gradually and textures altering. He tries to rationalize what's happening, but it's hard to deny the growing sense that something is invading his mind, something he cannot control. In a desperate attempt to maintain control, Richard shares his experiences with a few trusted friends, but they all react with skepticism and concern. They suggest that he stay away from the book and seek professional help. However, Richard can't. He feels that he's getting closer to something monumental, something that could change his understanding of the universe and his very destiny. He's more determined than ever to continue his research, even though the consequences are becoming increasingly unpredictable. As the days pass and Richard continues his study of the book, he begins to notice deeper changes in his perception of reality. His surroundings start to distort in subtle yet unmistakable ways. Sometimes he sees shadows moving independently, as if they are more than mere projections. Other times he hears distant sounds, muffled whispers that seem to come from a place far beyond his reach. But when he attempts to investigate, everything returns to normal, leaving him questioning whether he's losing his mind. Over time, these anomalies become more frequent. Richard struggles to sleep, haunted by vivid nightmares. In his dreams, he sees a colossal being, an entity of formlessness, surrounded by impenetrable darkness. This figure seems to watch him with a curious, almost intimidating gaze. In one of these visions, the being draws closer, and although its form is incomprehensible, Richard feels an overwhelming sense of being called by it. The being seems to communicate urgency, as if waiting for something Richard cannot yet understand. When Richard wakes up, he feels that the world around him is a little more distant, a little more unreal. He has difficulty distinguishing between what is dream and what is reality. Objects in his home begin to look distorted, their colors subtly shifting and their textures changing. He tries to rationalize what is happening, but it's hard to ignore the growing sense that something is infiltrating his mind, something that he cannot control. In a desperate attempt to keep his grip on reality, Richard shares his experiences with a few trusted friends, but they all react with skepticism and concern. They suggest he distance himself from the book and seek professional help, but Richard can't. He feels that he is approaching something grand, something that could alter his understanding of the universe and his own fate. He becomes more determined to continue his research, even though the consequences seem increasingly unpredictable. One particularly intense night, while Richard reads the book, he is overwhelmed by a vision more vivid than ever before. For the first time, he can clearly distinguish the entity behind the visions. It reveals itself as Azathoth. He shudders deeply at the name, as if the mere utterance of it holds the power to warp reality itself. Azathoth is not a creature of flesh and bone, but a primordial force, beyond space and time. It exists in a state far removed from human comprehension, a being whose very essence is to devour reality and meaning. As Richard absorbs more of the book's content, he begins to see a narrative unfold, one of chaos, of how Azathoth, with its destructive will, shaped and obliterated entire worlds, creations, and realms. The vision is terrifying, yet at the same time, Richard feels an odd fascination. He starts to understand that Azathoth is not a god in the traditional sense, but an entity of pure destruction, whose sole purpose is to consume what has been created. As Richard continues to delve deeper into the book, the entity's nature becomes clearer. Azathoth is not just an ancient force, it is an undeniable presence, trying to break through the boundaries between dimensions and enter Earth. The book, it turns out, is the key to opening the portal between worlds. Richard, unknowingly, has been chosen as the vessel for this crossing, the one who can bring Azathoth from its prison into the physical world. Richard is overwhelmed by this realization. The world he thought he understood is crumbling around him. He begins to see the cracks in the fabric of his reality, as the effects of Azathoth's presence begin to manifest more clearly. The visions intensify, the physical distortions become more pronounced, and Richard feels as if he's no longer in control. He's caught between a desire to understand this ancient force and the terror of what it means for humanity. Now Richard understands the book is not just a record of Azathoth, it is the instrument that will allow it to escape. The more he deciphers, the closer he comes to unleashing an apocalypse that no human mind can fully grasp. The question now isn't just whether he should continue, it's whether it is even possible to stop the inevitable. As Richard continues to decode the book, the changes in his reality grow even more pronounced. He begins to lose his grip on time itself. Hours feel like minutes, and entire days seem to vanish in a blur. The walls of his house appear to warp and breathe, as if the very space around him is alive. Shadows move across the corners of the room, shifting in ways that defy all logic. Objects sometimes disappear and reappear, not just in different locations but in alternate forms, as though the world is being rewritten in real time. The book seems to be exerting an increasingly powerful influence over him. Richard begins to hear a constant hum, a low-frequency vibration that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It's as if the book is resonating with the fabric of reality itself, calling something, someone, from beyond the veil. Richard realizes that this hum is a communication, a constant reminder of Azathoth's presence. His nightmares intensify. The formless being that once seemed distant is now always present in his dreams, its massive, ever-shifting form closing in on him. The darkness surrounding Azathoth pulses with an almost intoxicating energy, and Richard feels himself drawn toward it. He understands now that Azathoth's influence is not just psychological, it's physical as well. He can feel his body changing, his senses becoming more attuned to the cosmic reality around him. He is no longer just a man reading an ancient book. He is becoming part of the very fabric of the force he is unleashing. At times, Richard loses complete control of his actions. His hands move across the pages of the book without his conscious input, and his eyes blur with a strange hypnotic vision of the universe stretching out infinitely before him. He sees galaxies collapsing, stars burning out, and entire realities folding in on themselves. He feels as though he is being drawn into this cosmic collapse. The terror he once felt has faded, replaced by an almost compulsive need to continue, to finish what has been started. You can no longer stop the descent into madness, as Azathoth's influence claws at his very being, eroding his humanity. One cold, moonless night, as Richard deciphers the final pages of the book, the full gravity of the situation becomes clear. He sees the truth. Azathoth is not just an ancient entity to be unleashed, it is a consuming force that will devour everything. Time, space, life itself. The book was never meant to be read. It was meant to be a key, a mechanism to free Azathoth from its prison and allow it to reign over all of existence. The path Richard is on is not just a study of the unknown. It is the ritualistic summoning of an unimaginable horror. In the quiet of his study, Richard feels the weight of his decisions bearing down on him. He can stop now. He can burn the book, end his research, and perhaps the world will return to some semblance of normalcy. But a voice, not his own, whispers to him from within the depths of his mind. It is Azathoth's voice, insistent and all-consuming, promising him knowledge and power beyond comprehension. Azathoth's will fills him with a strange, perverse sense of purpose, an undeniable pull to bring the entity into the world. Richard is torn. He knows that if he continues, the world will end. Reality itself will unravel, and all of humanity will be swept into the abyss. But deep within him, something has shifted. The book has not just unlocked Azathoth's power, it has unlocked something within Richard. The curiosity that once drove him to study the book has now become an obsession. He feels a cold, numbing certainty that nothing else matters, that the end of the world is not an end but a beginning of a new, unimaginable order. He knows what he must do, but the weight of the decision hangs heavy on his conscience. There is no turning back. He cannot stop now, not when the culmination of everything he's done is so close. Richard stands before the book, his hands trembling as they hover over the final pages. The lines between reality and nightmare blur, and he feels as though the very essence of the universe is collapsing in on him. The final ritual is at hand, and whether he succeeds or fails, the world will never be the same. Richard takes a deep breath, feeling the pull of Azathoth grow stronger with each passing second. His mind, now fully consumed by the entity's presence, makes the choice for him. He opens the last page, fully aware that his action will irrevocably tear the fabric of reality apart. The moment his fingers touch the final symbol, the world around him begins to unravel, and the gateway to Azathoth is open. As Richard touches the final symbol in the book, everything changes. Time begins to warp, distorting and collapsing in on itself. His study dissolves into a void, and the familiar walls of his home crumble away, replaced by a vast expanse of swirling, formless darkness. It's as if the world has been peeled away, leaving only an empty, endless abyss behind. The boundary between dimensions has shattered, and Richard is no longer in control of his own mind, let alone the world around him. He can no longer discern what is real. Figures and objects flicker in and out of existence, merging and splitting apart in impossible ways. Faces from his past, both loved and forgotten, appear briefly before vanishing into nothingness. He hears voices from every corner, sometimes familiar, sometimes alien, but they all speak with the same chilling tone, the voice of Azathoth. The entity is everywhere, in every shadow, every whisper, every crack in the fabric of reality. Richard feels it pressing against his mind, suffocating him, devouring his very consciousness. The more he tries to cling to his sanity, the more he is consumed by the overwhelming force. In his panic, Richard tries to move, but his body feels heavy, as if it no longer belongs to him. He stumbles through the shifting void, unsure if his feet even touch the ground. The world around him bends and twists, obeying no laws of physics, no logic. Azathoth's presence is omnipresent, not just in the world, but in Richard himself. The entity has taken root in his mind, feeding off his fears, his doubts, his obsession. He can feel himself slipping away. The physical world and the abstract realms of the mind are no longer separate. Richard is becoming part of Azathoth's chaotic hunger, dissolving into the very nothingness that the entity feeds on. He is no longer Richard Thornton, the man who once sought knowledge and understanding. He is now a fragment, a fleeting thought in the cosmic chaos, a small piece of something vast and incomprehensible. And yet within this dissolution, there is a part of him, somewhere deep inside, that still clings to the hope that somehow this descent into madness can be stopped. But it's too late. Richard's mind is now fully consumed by Azathoth. There is no longer a distinction between his thoughts and the will of the entity. He has become an instrument for its arrival, a mere vessel for the cosmic destruction that is unfolding. The reality around him continues to collapse, unraveling like a fraying thread. The boundaries of space and time disintegrate, and what was once familiar is now alien and terrifying. The universe itself seems to be folding in on itself, as if the laws of physics no longer apply. Stars flicker and die in an instant. Galaxies collide and explode, and entire dimensions implode, their essence consumed by the insatiable hunger of Azathoth. Richard feels the presence of the entity growing stronger, more complete. The distortion in the fabric of reality is now absolute, and the only thing that remains is the entity itself, a vast primordial force that devours all existence, all meaning and all form. As the final remnants of the universe slip away, Richard realizes that there is no escape from Azathoth's influence. The very concept of reality has dissolved, and there is nothing left but the void, a place where even thought is meaningless. The horrors that Richard once feared are no longer his to endure. They have become part of him, part of the ever-expanding cosmic chaos, and then in the infinite expanse of nothingness, Richard is gone, his consciousness consumed by the will of Azathoth. There is no trace left of the man who once was. Only the endless, undifferentiated void remains, where time no longer exists and space is irrelevant. Azathoth's hunger has been satisfied, and the universe, once a vast expanse of stars and matter, is now a hollow, empty shell, a blank slate awaiting the next creation or destruction in an eternal cycle of chaos. The book lies somewhere in the dark expanse, its pages blank, its secrets now irrelevant. Azathoth, having consumed all that was, waits for the next chapter in the endless story of destruction.